Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Launching HeatSource webinar. My name is Emma Church. I'm an Impact Manager within the Sustainability team at Built Environment Smarter Transformation. We're formerly known as the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre. HeatSource is Scotland's low-carbon heat network, a new resource for those companies and organisations working in the decarbonisation of heat sector in Scotland. I'll speak more on the HeatSource programme and project a little later, and about what some of these resources are and how you can get involved in shaping this network to be as effective and useful as possible in supporting the sector growth throughout the life of this project. I'm delighted today to be joined by Andy McDonald, Head of Low Carbon Transition at Scottish Enterprise, Kyle Usher, Emission Manager at Nesta, and Dr. Wendy Hanson, Manager of the Large Grant Appraisals team at Scottish Enterprise. But before we get underway, I'd just like to highlight some housekeeping points, please, in order to help the webinar run as smoothly as possible. The session is being recorded and will be available to view on the Built Environment Smarter Transformation YouTube channel early next week. If you'd like to ask any questions or leave a comments, please click on the questions section in the control panel, type in your question and press send, and we will be checking these out throughout the course of the programme and try and address as many as we can in the Q&A session at the end. There'll be a couple of poll questions throughout the webinar today. They'll appear automatically on your screen and you'll have about 30 seconds to answer. It would be really great if you could respond to those, please. It'll give us some insights about what it is that you're looking for as an audience. At the end of the webinar, you will be given a feedback form, and please do what you can to fill this out. It's really valuable, and we take all questions and comments on board, even if we don't have time to answer them during the session. But your feedback is very valued to us. So let's sort of get warmed up a little this morning. We have over 110 registered for the webinar today, and I can see we've got about 60 joining us right now. Hopefully a few more will trickle in over the next few minutes, which is great. But it'd be really interesting for us to know what areas you work within in the sector. So you'll see a poll question come up. And if you could just tick which best describes the area of low carbon heat sector in which you work: manufacturing, installation, trade body or association, an energy company or public sector. So there'll be a few more seconds to answer that poll. Thanks very much. Great, we've got a really good mix there, and plenty from the public sector. So hopefully you'll be able to find something really useful out of what we're presenting with us today. So enough from me at the moment. Time to hear from our first speaker. So Andy McDonald is Head of Low Carbon Transition at Scottish Enterprise, the National Economic Development Agency, which is supporting the growth of the low carbon economy with public and private sector partners, regionally, nationally and globally. The key areas of focus for SE at the moment are decarbonisation of heat, transport, energy and energy systems. Andy's an environmental scientist by training and has worked in economic development in Scotland and overseas for over 30 years. At Scottish Enterprise, he's held leadership roles in innovation, R&D and manufacturing support, and has been Director of International Trade and Investment in both North America and in Europe, the Middle East and Africa. He's led several key sector teams and chaired a Scottish Biofuels Task Force and the Scottish Government Financial Sector Jobs Task Force. He's a Director of Scotland Europa and has been an advisor to the European Union Cluster Programmes and TCI, which is a global network of economic development specialists. And I'll just hand over to Andy to give us some insights on some of Scottish Enterprise's key focus areas at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. I'm just going to put up my presentation just now. So, good morning, everyone. It's great to have the opportunity to speak to you about why this is so important as part of the economic opportunity for Scotland, and particularly decarbonising heat, alongside our other work in decarbonising energy and my role in the low carbon transition team. Why clearly are we into this? Heat's about 52% of the energy demand from Scotland and a huge source of greenhouse emissions. And alongside the work that we're doing to decarbonise the production of energy and to decarbonise transport, it's one of the three major areas that is covered by government policy, and Scotland's very demanding and challenging net zero targets and ambitions. It's going to be decarbonising heat will be a crucial part of our ability to meet those targets, and it's a huge challenge in terms of numbers, in terms of getting there. So it's really important that we address the challenge of decarbonising heat. It presents huge opportunities as well as challenges for Scottish businesses, and we're supporting it through the creation of a heat national programme, which is part of our approach to economic development going forward, trying to identify where the major priorities and opportunities for Scotland lie. These are the main activities of SE's focus. You can see we do a lot of things in a lot of places. For us, the sweet spot is where we're working with companies around innovation, investment, and international opportunities and bring those together. But there are an awful lot of things that we do from the very earliest stages, supporting development and innovation as companies grow and bring on board new talent, new technologies, and take those to markets, commercialize those, bring in the right people to help with those at the right moment in time, bring the right investments together. And ultimately, what we're looking to do is try and build really good, strong companies in Scotland with the opportunity to globalize their products and services and become a major economic influencers in future from Scotland. We have for a long time worked with the government's ambitions to ensure that fair work is a part of that. So we're supporting companies who are bringing in good jobs and making sure that they contribute to developing skills and to working with their workforce and to creating opportunities in the places where they're based. And more recently, obviously, we're aligning that with ambitions around net zero as well. So we're looking at developing and supporting projects that contribute both to a just transition to a new low carbon future, but also address the net zero ambitions that Scotland has, that the globe has as well. And a lot of that will have been reflected and people will be aware of from the presence of COP26 in Glasgow last year, some of the enormous challenges that we face and some of the things that we can do through economic development, through business support here in Scotland to contribute to playing our part in those. I mentioned that the Decarbonising Heat is one of our national programmes, which helps us focus the resources across all of the activities of Scottish enterprise, both on the ground in Scotland in terms of innovation, investment, business growth support, but also in terms of our international activity with our colleagues in Scottish Development International. Alongside the heat in the low carbon space, where you're developing a hydrogen economy, and on the back of that, that also feeds into the work that we're now doing in further growing the offshore wind opportunities in Scotland. And we're working with the transport sector, particularly focused at the moment on the development of zero emissions heavy duty vehicles, one of the areas and niches where we think Scotland has a lot of capacity and opportunity. But as you can also see, we're looking at programs in digital, in space technology, and health for wealth, and in future healthcare manufacturing, all areas of significant opportunity for Scotland going forward. And this fits in there. So a lot of what we do will influence many of these other areas, and digital being a very good opportunity of that in terms of going forward. There's an awful lot of overlap between these programs. So what is the scale of the opportunity for Scotland? It contributes, as I say, to our net zero targets. It is an immediate and sizable opportunity. That's why we're involved in it. Huge opportunities over the coming years and a significant challenge to us to be able to deliver the industrial opportunity, but also to build the capacity and capability to install and service and support the transition of heat systems, whether that's in industrial applications, in the creation of district heat networks, or in the case of individual properties and individual houses as well. All of those things present opportunity. It is a massive economic opportunity. It's a significant jobs opportunity. Scotland has developed a climate emergency skills action plan. Our colleagues in Skills Development Scotland and a number of us involved in this call have been part of that, making sure that we have the right skills resources available to be part of the support to transition, to ensure that those jobs are available where they can add the most value. And again, I'll touch on some of that as I go through the presentation as well. Energy efficiency combined with low carbon heat can make a significant impact on fuel poverty and fuel costs, something that's really critical clearly right now in the current condition. And obviously we're also looking at the improvement in air quality, which is part of that, not just that contribution to the carbon reduction and the impact of global warming, but also the local environmental area, looking also at the quality of the life that we can have because we're improving the air quality in very local applications as well. There are a wide range of core and supportive technology and heat sources which can be used for low carbon heating. There's, and you can see from this slide, a host of different technologies for heat decarbonisation, and a lot of ways you can bring the support to those heat sources. A lot of technology in there, a lot of technology application opportunities, a lot of technology development opportunities, a lot about efficiency as well. And this doesn't even begin to touch things like other heat sources as well, right? Geothermal, mine working heat, for example, one of the areas that we've been involved in. It also, there are a lot of ways of bringing these different products together, and that too presents opportunity, and that's a critical part of why the approach to this has been driven through a lot of focus on the built environment and the wider issues there as well. So how do we make a smarter world, a smarter environment? And this plays back to the work that we're also doing on the decarbonisation of energy and energy systems. That's how we'll get the volumes of low carbon and zero carbon energy that we require to support this, whether that comes through electricity or hydrogen in the gas network and things like that. There's a number of other solutions that feed into this as well, and it needs to be joined up, which is part of the rationale for this approach that we're taking, and part of what the HeatSource model is going to help us to bring to bear on companies and support companies. Just a little bit on the background to the Decarbonising Heat National Programme. We have the cluster builder HeatSource, which is about raising awareness of the opportunities and starting to connect companies, academia, public sector and investors, being a focal point, and we'll hear a bit more about some of that in the course of this morning's event. We are in discussions with the Scottish Government and industry about how we deliver a heat hub, which is something that the industry identified would be really useful in terms of, really helpful in terms of helping shape the resources for Scotland and delivering some of the stuff that goes on beyond the cluster builder and the heat source. So bringing together industry leadership, bringing together government inward investment opportunities, funding, investment, putting together physical infrastructure as well to allow us to demonstrate this technology, and ultimately to support and continue to build the supply chain. And again, we'll hear later on today about some of the direct support to companies through investment advice, business support, grant support, and also the activities internationally that we can do to help support companies to, as they develop new technologies and new skill sets in this area, to potentially internationalize and reach out further in the markets. This is a huge challenge and opportunity for Scotland, but it's also a huge global challenge. So there are opportunities much more wide than just in Scotland for companies who have the abilities and the skill sets and can develop their business to grow. We already have done a lot of work. The Scottish Industry Directory is an online gateway to connect buyers and sellers and to raise awareness of who's already active in the markets. This is the heat space, heat and energy efficiency. There are a number of different industries, low carbon and other, available through the same route to the Scottish Industry Directory. So if you are interested in understanding and knowing more about what companies are active and where they see their skill sets, there are already a lot of companies connected up to that. And if you visit the site, you'll also find out how you can get, how you can add to that if you have a business that you feel has something to offer in there. And as I say, it covers a lot more of the low carbon space and industries than just heat and energy efficiency. There's a wide variety of things there, because we recognize, again, a lot of the skill sets are connected, and a lot of the skill sets will draw from various existing industry sectors as well. And that's why it's so important to have the cluster builder HeatSource available to help companies understand just what those opportunities are and how you get to some of the areas that and some of the advice that you will need if you want to consider how to understand how to operate in some of these other areas, and how to direct yourself to the support, and how to get the advice you'll need in order to, and support you may need in order to be able to make that transition to building and diversifying further as a manufacturer, as a supplier, as a service business, whatever your interest may be. And finally, the who to contact. This information is all available publicly. The Inquiry, Fulfilment and Research Services, EFRS, at Scottish Enterprise. Simply contact Scottish Enterprise through either the internet, through the or on the phone. You can sign up, and this information will be available through the webcast, the webinar, I should say. So you'll be able to sign up to our newsletter, which is regularly updates on information. And there's an online resource which contains all the information about what's going on just now in the heat opportunities and decarbonising that. You can get to it through the web link, or simply by searching online for low carbon heat and Scottish enterprise. And that'll get you to where we are and where the information is. So Emma, thank you for the opportunity to share a bit more about that. I look forward to any questions that may come up as we move through the session and discussing things further. And my thanks to the opportunity on behalf of myself and the team at Scottish Enterprise to share our enthusiasm for HeatSource and what a fantastic resource it's going to present to allow us to interact more with companies. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Andy. That was really great in helping us kind of understand the context and the work that's been done by Scottish Enterprise for this sector and wider. If anyone does have any questions for Andy, then please put them in the chat, and we'll get through as many as we can at the Q&A session at the end of the presentations, or hopefully you've been able to take note of some of those contact points there for following up. So next up, our next presentation is from Kyle Usher. He is Nesta's Mission Manager for Scotland, working on the Sustainable Future mission and based within the Scotland team. Kyle brings his experience in leading innovative technology projects to explore new opportunities and develop partnerships that work towards accelerating the UK's transition to a low-carbon productive economy by cutting UK household emissions and improving efficiencies in the labour market. Prior to Nesta, Kyle worked in the digital evolution and innovation roles for SCVO, Myeloma UK and Young Scott. With experience of product development, leading agile teams, delivering innovative projects and supporting organisations to leverage technology to improve their products, processes and service delivery. Kyle was due to join us live, but due to a last-minute flight change is unable to, but has kindly provided us with a recording of his presentation, which we will share now. Thank you.
Hello everyone, good morning, and thanks for Emma for hopefully a very kind and generous and complimentary introduction just there. I was very much looking forward to presenting you today, and due to late change of travel plans, I am unable to. I'm currently, as you listen to this, on my way to Wales. So I'm filming this yesterday afternoon, which is a very strange experience to just talk to myself in this way. But I've been asked to talk a little bit about Nesta's work in decarbonisation, and I'm going to share two quick projects with you. I'm going to really just give an overview of them. If there's any interest in them, please do get in touch, and I'd be love to speak to you about them. But I think this is an interesting sort of forum to do this. HeatSource is launching today. It's a collaborative network for the industry, and for me, it's a great idea to set this up and really have a place to collaborate and share knowledge across the sector. The challenge of decarbonisation is so big and needs to happen so quickly that we really need to be working together in partnership to do it. So I'll jump in and get this underway really. So my name is Kyle Usher, and I work for Nesta in the Sustainable Future team. I head up the work for the team in Scotland. And our sort of mission area is to reduce household emissions by 28% by 2030, which is in line with the UK targets. And we're really, focusing largely on heat pumps here as an available technology that Nesta can support to sort of accelerate really. So we're looking to do that through trials, experimentation, innovation, research, a range of things, and these are the 5 areas that we're looking at. But I'm really going to move on quickly from this to get into the interesting work. So the first one here is called Innovation Sweet Spots, and this is a piece of work with the Discovery Hub at Nesta to really try and identify the technologies that are on sort of an upward curve. To do that, we use these 4 signals: so research data, investment data, the amount of mentions in news and also in Parliament, to kind of aggregate up to have a sense of where these technologies are going. So with this, we've done a few things, and I'm really going to go through this quickly, just to give you a flavour of it. But we've developed sort of a typology really of is something new, so relatively small numbers, but actually high growth. We're calling that emerging. Something's hot, then it means that we've got high growth and high numbers. So it's been established for a bit more time, but still, on a growth trajectory. Stabilizing means high numbers, still high magnitude, but actually low growth. So it's sort of plateaued and it's becoming kind of potentially, mainstream now. And then dormant is low growth and low magnitude. And there's a few things we're trying to do with this. So first we've looked at sort of, let's take just the research data. So it's the research funding that's come out through UKRI against these different technologies and sort of see where things are. We can see that heat pumps are hot, so high and growing numbers. Not as high as we would like, but they're on a growth trajectory. Whereas actually energy management is potentially stabilizing. So we've got some good numbers in terms of the amount of funding per year, but actually that hasn't grown a huge amount over time. So yeah, we're sort of plotting some things there, but we can do a bit more than that and add some detail to this. So this is now looking at the media mentions of heat pumps in The Guardian over the last 15 years. They have their data open and sort of available for this. And it's an interesting one, this, that actually, back in 2008, there was actually more mentions than there was in 2020. And then we've seen sort of a dip in mentions, and then in the last 5 years, that's risen up again. And we've got in the top right corner here a little bit on Gartner's hype cycle, which is when something's new gets talked about a lot and big sort of ambitious claims are made about it, and people say grand things, and then actually that tends to take a dip and you get a lot of negative news because, well, it hasn't been transformative. We haven't seen it take over the world, so perhaps it's no use at all. And then the plateau productivity is where the technology comes out of that and actually is useful and has growth, but it takes some time, and you then get it much more widely accepted. So this is sort of the hype cycle. If we look at this alongside heat pumps in The Guardian, we see that the sort of pattern is there a bit. That it was talked about a lot initially, then died down, quite a lot of negativity, and then more recently a lot more positivity, as we know that they're being installed across the country in larger numbers. So if we look at this now with hydrogen and the term hydrogen heating, we have similar kind of patterns. Now, is this hype cycle, or is it actually that decarbonisation has become a higher interest topic? So we had the climate crisis announced 5-6 years ago now. We had COP26 in Glasgow last year. There's these things that are kind of saying, well, we know we need to do more about this, so we're talking about these things. So bear that in mind, that could be a hype cycle, it could be these things that are now more accepted and more well known, or it could be that actually we're just sort of experiencing an uptick in every element of decarbonisation. Looking at a third signal now, so investment data, we can see that there's actually sort of worrying news is how we're stating it here, that both in terms of number of deals and in the investment raised in the last couple of years have both tailed off a bit. We've seen a downturn, with the exception being hydrogen. A lot more investment in the last couple of years than previously, but it's a very much mixed picture. And as part of that is actually looking at the investment data alongside the research funding. So we're calling this the missing investment in low carbon heating, where there's a good amount of research funding. Actually, it's not being followed up with a huge amount of business investment. So further sort of investigation is needed to find out why. This is something we've done a little bit of, but I'd like to do a bit more. So I thought I'd just mention it at the end of this, which is actually sort of clusters of innovation and research, and saying, are there parts of the country, are there universities, innovation centres who are really pivotal? They've been mentioned in lots of bits of research. So something we've modelled very quickly, but if that's of interest to anyone, do come and speak to us about that as well. It's sort of a nice next step for this piece of work. So I just wanted to give a very quick snapshot of that. I've rattled through that in probably half the time I normally would, but I want to also then pick up on something that is a bit more practical in terms of what we're dealing with just now in Scotland. And this is a piece of research where we're looking at the how we can make a case for sort of strategic and localized transition plans to achieve net zero homes by modeling the potential or sort of target uptake in low carbon heating across Scotland. So I'll just swap to this. This was just published today and then sort of still to be promoted, but getting an early look at this. And I'm just going to rush through this first bit of it where we're talking about the kind of current state of things and pick up the narrative here. So what we've done on this chart is plot three different sets of targets. So we've got Scottish government commitments. So what Scottish government have identified that we need to do to hit net zero by 2045. Plot the CCC balance pathway for numbers of low carbon heating or heat pumps specifically. And also look at the regulatory proposals and standards which were in the Scottish Government's heat and building strategy at the end of last year. And sort of plot them and sort of see what that looks like and see where the differences are as well and why. So we've added some lines to this chart that gives us an idea of the trajectories and the numbers per year to actually get up to the numbers that have been targeted. And what we can now do is sort of have a little look at each one. So, you know, I've made some analysis of this and feel like Scottish Government's targets, I totally understand why they're the numbers they are, because they have to add up basically to net zero by 2045. But it's actually maybe overly aggressive in terms of the replacement cycle of units per year over that time. The CCC's pathway doesn't get there fast enough. They do include heat networks and other technologies in their numbers. So this is just the number of heat pumps. So again, I understand why they are as they are. And then looking at regulations, I find is a really interesting one. So the regulations proposed, so not confirmed, but proposed in the heat and building strategy. If we look at the numbers to reach those regulations, then it gives us a really interesting pathway. And the fourth pathway I've looked at is sort of the Nesta pathway. So taking the regulations, but to say that, you know, if a regulation comes in on January the 1st, you can't, well, it's very unlikely that you'll be fitting every property that's covered in those regulations with low carbon heating on January the 1st. So there's going to be a lag. There's going to be sort of, you know, needs to be growth. You need demand to trigger supply and for supply to be able to keep up with demand. So I've set that as a 3-year lag on the regulations. And then because there's a lag, we have to do a bit of catch up. So the numbers go up above what the regulations are over the period towards 2045. So this just gives us this growth curve, and it's purely speculative. It's saying, well, based on the regulations, based on the targets, what does that look like? But what we can do then is say, okay, well, let's look at it now per property type, or more accurately, more per heating type. So for properties that are covered in the first regulations, such as new builds, well, there's perhaps going to be a growth in the number of new builds that have heat pumps. The knock-on effect of that is you might have a decrease in the number of oil properties and gas properties that get heat pumps installed, as you know, the regulations have said that new builds need heat pumps, but haven't actually specified yet that the oil and gas do. So I'm not going to go through this step by step. It sort of walks us through, not every year, but kind of what might happen as this grows. But you can see now we're sort of zooming out on this chart, and the big blue bit here is gas properties. And if nothing else, this chart kind of gives us a sense of the scale of you know, what we're dealing with different property types. But we're trying to do more than that. So where I want this work to go next is actually we can create a chart like this, or more detailed than this, for every area of Scotland. And the profiles are really very different between Glasgow, Aberdeen, Edinburgh, or rural areas in the Highlands, Dumfries and Galloway, Argyll and Bute. They have very different profiles as their property types are different. And the challenge is actually quite different for each local authority, you know, both in terms of the scale of numbers, but also where those rises are on the chart. You know, some areas have much higher numbers of new builds than others. Some areas have much higher numbers of oil properties than others, and elsewhere. And just very finally on this orange bit at the end here is then if we were to factor in heat pumps replacing heat pumps after sort of 20 years of having growth in heat pumps, we get the second peak over near 2045. So lots of work that can be done here, lots of insights can be pulled from this. I will stop sharing for now. just wanted to really preview those. It's the type of work we'd love to share with people across the HeatSource network. We're still to sort of see how this emerges and what it becomes, but I'm really keen to be involved and be sharing things with people. So I'll leave this here. Thanks very much for having me. I'm delighted that HeatSource is launching today. I think it's much needed, and we'd love to hear from anyone who's interested to follow up with any of this. I'm sure Emma can share some links to this information and to get in contact with me as well on email or Twitter. It's fine. So thanks very much. Sorry I can't join you for the Q&A. Hope the rest of the session goes well, and look forward to hearing from some of you. Thanks. Bye.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. Many thanks to Kyle for sharing those insights and really current research that's been carried out by Nesta. Obviously, Kyle is unable to join us for the Q&A session, but if anyone does have any questions specifically for him, we can pass those on. Or that you'll find that some of his contact details, email and Twitter handle have been added to the chat. And please do make sure that you download the link to that new research on modelling heat pump growth in Scotland. And we'll be sure to make sure that that's uploaded to the HeatSource website now that that's been shared today. So next up is myself. Hopefully you can see my screen there. So I'm actually way ahead of myself, I beg your pardon. So yes, absolutely. Today is the launching HeatSource webinar, but in fact, heatsource.org, which is where you can find all of our resources, went live on the 11th of May last month at All Energy. And for any of you that were there, hopefully you got a chance to pop by our stand or hear myself talk about this programme in person. So HeatSource is, like I say, Scotland's low carbon heat network, and not a heat network in the sense that some of you may be familiar with, but more of the collaborative knowledge exchange type network. So Built Environment Smarter Transformation, formerly Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, I beg your pardon, we're awarded this contract to deliver this decarbonisation of heat cluster on behalf of Scotland's enterprise agencies. So it's a pan-Scotland approach to this with Scottish Enterprise, Highlands and Islands Enterprise and South of Scotland Enterprise. And ultimately what we are here to do is to support the low carbon heat industry and supply chain to grow in Scotland, to take advantage of some of those opportunities presented by the transition to net zero and the policies that Scottish Government have adopted and will be taking forward, some of which we've heard from Andy earlier, in that this is part of Scottish Enterprise's strategic programme of key areas that have been determined to be significant areas of growth in the coming years. And yeah, this is just one part of what that larger programme is. And I'm really pleased to be leading on this programme, and we've developed heatsource.org, which has a plethora of resources on kind of training availability, case studies, upcoming events, and really is looking to be a place for you as the low carbon heat sector in Scotland to join. And why really is because from Kyle's presentations, it's clear that there's a lack of investment from business side of things, not so much on the research side, in developing heat pumps and heat network infrastructure on the manufacturing aspect in Scotland. So HeatSource is here to try to identify what some of those challenges are, so what some of those barriers are that are being faced by you that are working in the sector, and hopefully signpost into ways that we can support in terms of making growth decisions and supporting you in looking forward and finding where you can make those investments and what are the market and sector indicators that will help you in making those decisions. So we have a programme of events And we'd like you to be really involved in shaping what those events are. So again, really communicating with us in order to tell us what those challenges are, and hopefully we can design a programme and make sure that HeatSource is really able to deliver in providing a space and a rallying point really for you guys to communicate your needs and provide us with insights to deepen understanding of what those challenges and opportunities really are. So again, like I say, it's a pan-Scotland approach. All enterprise agencies are involved. Highlands and Islands and South of Scotland as smaller agencies, but actually covering probably the majority of Scotland, and with regional areas with their own specific challenges, which again present some of their own opportunities that may or may not be heat pump or heat network appropriate. But let's look at some of the other technologies, complementary technologies, or other activities such as energy efficiency measures that need to be put into place before new low carbon technologies are suitable. Like I say, it's ourselves at Best, Built Environment Smarter Transformation, that are delivering in this programme. Our recent name change is hopefully reflective of how we have developed from being a construction innovation centre, looking at Scotland-wide innovation, but actually we're more than construction, and more and more being asked and delivering projects that are affecting the wider and built environment in its widest sense, really. Also, by linking in with HeatSource and from us delivering it, we also have access to the other innovation centre family, for example, Data Lab and Census, and also through our strategic partnerships, with ETP, Scotland's Research Alliance for Energy, where we can signpost to some of the funding available from them. And this network is for the heat pump and heat network infrastructure and their supply chain, but also that's the sector that we're really targeting and wanting to support through this, but very much understanding that skills is important, and we will signpost to the most recent research and activities happening and developments on that side of things from the trade associations and from Skills Development Scotland and other organisations. Again, mentioned earlier, Andy mentioned some of the complementary technologies, for example, demand management and energy efficiency measures and energy systems as a whole, and how we can integrate low carbon heat technologies into the wider energy system, and making sure that we're supporting those organisations as well. So, like I said, the HeatSource website is now live. We provide signposting on the different support available, funding, one of which you'll hear about just after myself. A programme of events, which is starting from today, our launch webinar. And we will want feedback from yourselves on what type of events it is that you'd like to see. And making sure that HeatSource is really working for you as a sector. We have a monthly newsletter. You can find the sign up on the website. We have case studies looking at best practice and examples of how low carbon heat technologies have been implemented to date across Scotland. And we'll be looking for more of them. So we really do want you guys to get involved in sharing what your experiences are and what you're hearing from your clients and customers on the ground. We have a matchmaking platform coming soon, which will hopefully help yourselves link up with others who are working on either innovations or projects or other collaborative opportunities going forward. And I'm currently working my way through the company follow-ups in terms of one-to-ones from our launch event at All Energy. So if I spoke to you then, I'll be catching up with you shortly. And if you have a request for a one-to-one, pop your name and your details in the chat, or give us an email at HeatSource at be-st.build. What I can share with you today is earlier this month we launched our Champions sort of initiative, A HeatSource champion really is a company that exemplifies best practice and is willing to put themselves forward and share the knowledge that they have, the experiences that they have in terms of using different technologies, installing technologies, the feedback that they've got, and speak to some of those challenges, but also the opportunities being faced by the sector. If you'd like to put yourself forward to be a champion, you'll have the opportunity to contribute to our events as a speaker, or in terms of shaping what those events look like. Our social media and other media, for example, a spotlight or a case study to be included in our newsletter to expand your reach. And you may be asked to take part in industry insights groups. For us, again, things like the Heat Hub that Andy mentioned earlier, helping shape and develop what the resources and what the support that HeatSource is or could be going forward. If you would like to be considered as a HeatSource champion, you can contact us at the email address there, but also on the website there is a new champions page where you'll be able to see some of the organisations that have already put themselves forward, and also some of the FAQs in terms of what would be involved in any commitment and things like that, which it isn't much, but really we just want you to support us, to promote us, to allow us to promote you and support the sector as a whole. So yeah, ultimately, please stay in touch. Thank you so much for joining us today. You can sign up to the newsletter, give us an email with any queries or requests, like I say, a one-to-one or an inquiry around the Champions programme, and do follow us on social media. We have Twitter and LinkedIn, and we're really starting to build up the community here, and making sure that we're sharing the most up-to-date information, like the modelling activity that's been done by Nesta, and also the most up-to-date and support available, for example, funding, like Wendy's going to touch on shortly. So yeah, absolutely. Please keep in touch. Thanks a lot. So next up, we have Wendy. So we have, I beg your pardon, we have Dr. Wendy Hanson, the head of large grant appraisals team at Scottish Enterprise. This team delivers the primary grant funding mechanisms for research and development and SMART, Scotland's capital investment, to businesses all throughout Scotland. They're also a key go-to team for various Scottish Government funding programmes, such as carbon capture and utilisation, zero emissions heavy-duty vehicles, and the recently launched Low Carbon Manufacturing Challenge Fund. It's this latter fund that Wendy will be describing in a little bit more detail today. And while that is a manufacturing challenge fund that is wider than just heat, Wendy's here today, and hopefully you'll be able to, if you're a manufacturing firm, see where that fund might be suitable for you. I'll hand you over to Wendy now.
Thanks very much, Emma. Good morning, everyone. Lovely to be here today. So as per the introduction, I'm going to tell you about a newly launched programme we've got to fund some low carbon opportunities. The Challenge Fund was launched with £25.5 million and is running over 4 years. It's money that's being given to Scottish Enterprise to manage by the Scottish Government. It's an open funding source, so it's not a call, it doesn't have specific deadlines, and nor is it competitive. So basically, projects which are put forward to us which meets the Challenge Fund criteria and are eligible for support should all be supportable in this programme. What we're looking for is people to bring forward grant applications that are above £150,000, but there's no upper ceiling in terms of the amount of funding that you can ask for. Obviously, we're not 100% funding, so you will have to find some match funding. So don't go crazy with your applications. It's a pan-Scotland initiative, so we're operating this on behalf of SOSI and HI, as well as Scottish Enterprise operational area, and of companies of all shapes and sizes. The fund was announced on the 19th of May by the First Minister, and then Mr McKee formally launched the programme at the Made in Scotland Awards later that same evening. And you can find information about it on scottishenterprise.com and also find business support. What are the objectives of the programme? So there's three very broad objectives that we're working to. What we're looking for is companies who are transitioning to the low carbon economy, either maybe by developing a new product or service or introducing a new technology where the kind of innovation is happening in the manufacturing of the product. Or it could be just in the end use as well. So you kind of have to think far and wide. I mean, a lot of projects I think would be pretty eligible for support. Or it could be something in this sector that's contributing to the circular economy. So very broad, far-reaching objectives that I hope you might kind of think would be, oh, I might have a project that would fit that. How are we funding the projects? Well, we're using three core subsidy regimes. We've moved away from state aid now, but we're basically funding the activities being presented to us under what we traditionally have called our R&D scheme, RSA, or capital expenditure programme, or the environmental aid scheme. So they'll be the cover for providing the funding. What's the application process? What we're looking for is people who've got an idea that think might be supportable to contact us, possibly through EFRS or directly through an account manager if they have one. Then we'll send out an expression of interest form just to capture a bit of information about what the potential project is. Once that's returned, we'll triage that to make sure it fits with both the programme objectives and also we can make it fit with one of the subsidy regimes I've just mentioned. If that looks possible, then we'll set up a meeting with the company and we'll have a much more detailed project discussion with you prior to applying for funding. If we think it's not going to fit this programme, then we'll try and signpost your idea somewhere else. For example, there might be a future programme coming along that your application might be more appropriate for. Once applications are submitted, then we will appraise and approve these using our standard SE delegated authority rules and then issue contracts and pay out grants from there on in. In terms of interest to date since the launch, we've had 150 inquiries submitted and we've sent out over 100 expressions of interest. So far, we're aware of 4 applications already in progress. So there's plenty of money still there for everybody else. In terms of getting in touch and finding out a bit more about the programme, we've got Lynn Pringle, who is project managing the overall programme, and then there's myself leading on the grant appraisal side. And then we have 4 people who are helping on the more detailed company discussions, Alan Dick and Andrew Whitelaw if it's capital investment or environmental aid, Gregor McDonald or Andrew McFarlane if it's something that's more like an R&D type project. As I said, your ideas, whilst might be suitable for this programme, but they might also be more suitable for something else that's also running around the network at the moment. So I thought it might be useful to finish with a kind of slide on, well, what else is coming or what else is already live in terms of potential funding support. So we've got a carbon capture and utilisation programme which opened in April, the low carbon manufacturing, which I've just kind of gone over. And then coming forward over the summer, we've got zero emissions heavy duty vehicles launching with £28 million. There's a clean energy transition partnership launching in September, and then the decarbonisation of heat, very relevant of course, also launching in September of this year. So that's all I'm going to cover in slides, and hopefully look forward to seeing you some of your questions in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Wendy. That's really great to hear about that new fund. And yeah, hopefully there are people in the audience that will put forward some of those expressions of interest or spot something else coming on the horizon that might be more suitable to them. So thanks very much. We've heard from all of our panelists today. So just before we get into the Q&A, there is another short poll. So given what you've heard this morning about the Low Carbon Manufacturing Challenge Fund, will you be likely to apply? So yeah, just this poll will be here for 30 seconds or so. And if your answer is maybe, I would like to find out more before I decide, then please get in touch with myself and we can discuss that, or get in touch with Wendy and her team, and they'll be able to give you a little bit more insights if there are some more technical pieces of information that you'd like to find out. Excellent. Okay, great. We've got quite a lot there. I know that quite a lot of our audience is from the public sector, so a manufacturing fund may not be exactly applicable, but that's great that over 25% of the rest of you are keen to find out more or to jump right in with an inquiry. Fantastic. So that's us. We can move on to our Q&A session. Hopefully we can get our other speakers and panelists on. Obviously Kyle won't be able to join us, but we will forward on any Nesta related questions on to him. Let's see if we've got any questions there. Okay. So a question from Alistair. Could you explain why biomass heat is not a core heat decarbonisation technology when it is proved to be a mature and effective technology for many building and heat network types? Andy, would you be able to cover that over in terms of the kind of strategic programme and why heat pumps seem to be the key technology?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a problem. Firstly, thanks for the question, Alistair, and I can assure you that biomass is definitely a part of the mix. The context of the presentation today, we've looked at where the sort of emerging technology opportunities are in particular, and some of the sources for providing heat, providing energy to those, including biomass boilers. But you're absolutely right. Biomass is a core part of the decarbonisation opportunity, but it's particularly effective already in some food and drink applications, for example. And there is increasing scope for that, and we are doing some foresighting and research work just now on some further opportunities and better understanding both the market and the technology applications there. So that will feed through over time. In the short term, the focus, particularly just now around heat pumps, is simply because of the scale of the opportunity immediately in those and in their application at large volume, and the opportunity that presents to significantly ramp up quickly manufacturing opportunity and service and installation opportunity in those areas. So it is part of the longer term strategic areas of interest, but in the short term, the very initial opportunity we believe lies in addressing the opportunities with heat pumps, because those will address some of the volume challenge that we have. But yeah, absolutely reassure you that biomass is definitely a part of the mix, and as you rightly say, has already had quite a significant impact in reducing the carbon impact in a number of areas, particularly as around food and drink applications in places like distilleries and food manufacturing.
That's great. Thanks very much, Andy. Hopefully that answers that question. Next up, we have a question from Ken, who mentions there's no reference to deep geothermal energy. Why is that not part of Scottish enterprise strategy? I would imagine the answer is quite similar to that of biomass there.
Yes, and one thing I would encourage, please, I should have said earlier as well, please contact the team through the links to Scottish Enterprise if you have questions about specific technologies. Our interests are wider, but the core focus at the moment needs to be on these things that present sort of fairly immediate economic opportunity in order and get us to moving towards the carbon reduction targets. We have looked at deep geothermal energy. We've been looking also at how we might find ways of incentivising financing and development of deep geothermal. It's not as big a priority in Scotland as it is elsewhere. Mine water geothermal has been of more immediate interest and seems to have greater potential in the near term. But there's no question that deep geothermal energy is part of the opportunity, and indeed we're looking with as part of the transition of the oil and gas sector as well, at the opportunities for geothermal offshore as well, utilising some of the technology and experience that they already have in handling geothermal heat offshore, and how we might link that into some of the operations and opportunities that are going on as well. So we are looking at it, and again, if you look to the broader strategies, there will be cover of that. It's just part of the focus immediately. But that's also part of the reason for having not only these sessions, but for having the opportunity with HeatSource and more broadly, is to look at some of the wider opportunities and to evaluate those for their longer term potential in particular.
Okay, and also just to mention that the HeatSource website is constantly being updated and growing, and we are working on a sort of geothermal kind of page there, which can highlight some of the key work that's been done in Scotland to date, like say alongside mine water geothermal and some of the other kind of wider activities around looking at de-risking that technology, which I think that capital risk and investment risk is one of the key barriers to uptake for that particular technology as well. we do have a final question here, one for Wendy, asking what is the intervention level for the Low Carbon Manufacturing Challenge Fund, and can private contributions extend to contribution in kind?
Sorry, I was on mute there. Thanks so much for the question. So the intervention levels for the Challenge Fund will depend on exactly which of the subsidy regimes we're putting into play to support the project. So for example, if it's an R&D project, it might be between say 25 and 35% depending on the size of your company. Environmental aid might be about up to 50%, and environmental aid, RSA support is based on usually company size and location, so it really varies depending exactly where you're sited in Scotland. In terms of using in-kind contributions, I'm afraid we're not allowed to accept them as the match funding. It has to be proper hard cash.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that, Wendy. That's really helpful, and hopefully that answers that question well enough. And if there are I'd say that would probably be covered in the expression of interest and the kind of conversations that can get started with yourself and your team, figuring out exactly which of those levers are being used, and therefore what cash has to be found from the manufacturer or from the company side. Great. Okay, so we just have one final poll. Thank you. We're almost at the end of the session today. So going forward, thinking about the types of events that you'd like to see from HeatSource and or BEST going forward, what type would you like to see? So a meet the buyer type event, an opportunity to speak with local authority buyers, and I know we've got quite a local authority heavy audience or public sector heavy audience, an opportunity to speak with technology providers. Information on funding opportunities and their availability for research and development type projects. Looking inwards on how your company can contribute towards net zero in your own operations, or area-based events. What are the specific challenges and opportunities in the different geographic areas in Scotland? Okay, just a few more seconds on that. Fantastic. Okay. So regional challenges, I think, is being out there as a really positive one, but also the meet the buyer type event. So absolutely, we'll take that feedback going forward, and hope that will help shape what our events programme for HeatSource looks like going forward. So that brings us to the end of the webinar. I'd just really like to thank the audience for joining and for all of your questions. To the panel for your presentations and sharing your thoughts and your answers to those questions. We have posted quite a few details for different links in the chat. If you haven't already, please download any of those links and handouts before you leave the webinar. And as you do leave the webinar, you will be given a feedback form. It's really important to us, and we do take a lot of information for that in terms of planning future events. So please do take a moment to fill that out. You will receive another link tomorrow morning. And as a final thank you just for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you at our future events. In the meantime, do stay in touch, and there's various links provided in the chat box in terms of keeping in touch. And have a lovely afternoon. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Anne.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone for joining us.
Bye, everyone.